I'm very well. How are you, Kenny?
I am absolutely fine. So, Ewan and I go back a long, long way, probably absolutely one of my bestest friends in the world. And I'm so glad tonight, though, that I'm talking to him in terms of Spotlight. So, we're just going to treat this as a wee chat between us. And I suppose, just like Raymond and I as well, not get carried away and forget, and we'll be here for about 4 hours or something like that.
Yeah, remember, I can talk for hours. I have no problem talking to people. So please interrupt when suitable.
Fantastic. And tonight as well, we're recording it as we've got a couple of people are maybe watching during the live recording, but these are then uploaded to YouTube and they've been viewed extensively so far by different people as college lecturers have been using it with students, and in some secondary schools, they've been using it with pupils as well. And I think because of the current context that everyone's living in, a lot of young people that are pursuing careers in theatre arts and performing arts and creative industries aren't maybe having those opportunities to visit places or get work experience in certain roles. So that's really, aside from our personal relationship, why I've invited you here professionally tonight.
Oh, thank you very much.
To have a chat.
You're very privileged.
So you are down tonight as Ewan Campbell, Theatrical Costumier. So can I get you just to kick off with, tell us a bit about that. Tell us what you do, where you do it, how it works.
Well, a theatrical costumier is a person who provides the costumes for productions. I own Utopia Costumes, which I've owned now for 22 years. Utopia itself has been a company on the theatre scene for probably nearly 40 years, and I've owned it for nearly half of that time. We supply all sorts of theatrical costumes to all sorts of companies, both professional and amateur, throughout the UK and Ireland.
Wow, okay. Now you might tell by my tinsel in the background and starry lights that it's Christmas time, but I've had these up for some time now in my little quiz den. Thinking about Christmas and this time of year when this is being recorded in December, what would things in a normal year be like in Utopia at the moment?
In a normal year, we would have just put out round about 60 pantomimes over the last 3 weeks.
Wow.
We provide professional and amateur shows. I don't want to use the word amateur because there's lots of hobby theatricals. That would probably be.
Okay.
We provide hobby theatrical shows, and we also provide professional pantos. And we would just at this point come to the end of this week, we'd be sitting with probably 1,000 costumes to be washed and processed next week before we finished to go on a Christmas break. So
when you say 60 pantomimes would be out or have gone out, like,
yeah,
how many costumes is that roughly?
It depends on the panto. For pantos and musicals are two different things when you're costuming them. Pantomimes tend to be a lesser number of costumes towards a musical. So, and we also have to do them in a more condensed time. So at this time of year, we could be putting out 8 Cinderellas in a week, 4 Jack and the Beanstalks, 4 or 5 Dick Whittingtons, and a Partridge in a Pear Tree.
And when you say putting out, sorry, what's that kind of process then when you say putting them out? Are they...
Right, the process is like when people order any kind of costume, they get in touch with us. They will send us their requirements. Different pantomimes have different requirements, although the basis of them are the same. So they have different. They might have a male baddie instead of a female baddie. They might have a male principal boy instead of a female principal boy. That kind of thing. We've even also done female dames in pantomimes, but they will send us their requirements and the sizes of their cast. We will prepare their shows normally about a week to 10 days in advance of the show going out, and we will send it to them on a Wednesday. They get it on a Thursday. They try it on a Thursday night normally. We get any problems that they have to sort out on a Friday morning. We get these costumes to them by a Saturday at latest on a Sunday, so they have them for their dress and their technical rehearsal because they'll generally open on a Tuesday. Okay. So the process is that we would rail up the show, which means we take the costumes from stock, we match the sizes of the costume to the sizes of the people because people are different sizes, and then we label them up with a wee label, so that becomes their costume for the week. And then we put it in a box and we send it on a pallet, and it goes by a pallet company to wherever it is in the country.
Wow, so there's a huge amount of, I suppose, a lot of people just see at the end of the day the costumes on the stage and things, but it sounds like even just for panto season, a huge amount of work in advance of that, and then afterwards, as you're saying, lots of washing and things at the other end.
Yes, yeah. We have to cover things at Christmas time, things like, well, last year, for instance, all pantos go in cycles, or they seem to. So they have Cinderella years, you have Jack and the Beanstalk years, you have years like last year, which was a mixture year, which was great. I mean, but there have been years where I've had 8 Cinderellas on stage at the same time. So if you imagine that every set of Ugly Sisters has 5 sets of costumes, wow, that's 40 dames costumes on stage. Plus we provide all the wigs and things for the dames as well. So our wig dresser will dress in excess of probably 150 to 200 wigs over this period of time to cover the demand that's needed for panto season anyway. I mean, our biggest market is the hobby market. I mean, we do lots and lots of different pantos all over the place. We do huge, great big pantos in big theatres with companies who spend thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds, and we do village hall pantos as well. Sometimes the village hall pantos can be just as luxurious as the main stage ones, but it's all to do with how the thing looks, because at the end of the day, in panto, for instance, it's how the thing opens, what it looks like when it opens, and how the thing closes. So the more sequins and feathers you can throw at the end in the finale, it leaves the audience with a better picture of your panto.
So I suppose it's part of that magic of panto. Costume's a huge part of that as well. And something that I know that we've spoken about before, whether it's a professional show, as you say, or someone's hobby when they do another job during the day and they become a panto character at night for a week, something exciting. Costumes always strike me as something very, very personal to someone as well, that maybe somebody's not that interested in what the backdrop looks like or the set in terms of being in the show, but costume is really quite personal, isn't it? So how do you deal with that aspect of things?
Well, the main thing is people go to see a show. So people will tend not to watch inanimate objects. Humans are not designed to do that. So they'll watch the people on the show, on the stage, moving around. Costumes are never designed to be seen close up. I mean, they're meant to be seen 30 feet away. So when people, if you're working with a professional company, for instance, the costumes that arrive in my crates, or we go with the costumes normally for a pro show, we go and fit the costumes, but they're just like a professional actor puts them on like a boiler suit, because it's just something to wear at their work. When you're doing it for people in the hobby market, they're there to look good. They want to look good for their friends and family. So we do have to deal with things like people's preferences in color, whether they need their arms covered, that kind of thing. Generally for shows, for pantomime, for instance, as long as you hit the mark with your principal girl has to be sweet and lacy, pretty and frilly. Your principal boy has to have a short tunic generally. You know, your dame has to have flamboyant costumes and big fancy wigs. Your baddies have to wear horns or have collars on the backs of their costumes. As long as we can hit these kind of marks and produce costumes that really, if they were coming out of a box for a pantomime I was directing, for instance, because I've directed many pantomimes in my day, if they were coming out for what I wanted, I would be more than happy with them. So generally, that's how, in the year, it's the only time I really design costumes. We design costumes at Christmas because if I'm working with a professional company, I'll tend to work along with the director or the designer to design the costumes for their concept. But if I'm designing costumes for our stock pantos for our customers, we will use the same scenario. I mean, there's costumes that go out to professional shows that have been worn by TV stars and people in soaps and things that go out the following year to somebody. I mean, I don't have a separate wardrobe for professional panto and for hobby panto, because to me the hobby panto is just as good, and a lot of them are. Yeah. So. And
when you said there, that was interesting when you said about theatre costumes aren't designed to be, seen close up. That's like your clothes, I suppose, which are different. So what kind of things do you, I mean, we're talking about panto just now, but as a costumier then, what kind of things do you provide costumes for then?
For panto.
No,
For
panto's one thing. Like you've
Ah.
mentioned musicals and things. Do you do lots of other things?
Yeah, we provide mainly musical theatre costumes. We also provide professional opera. We have provided television costumes. We provided film costumes. There are different requirements for each of these sectors. When you're doing film and television costumes, everything's close up, so it has to be more authentic and more real. If it's on a stage, it has to look good visually, and you have to create the lines and the contouring that you would expect in a body shape. So you have to outline where things go. So for instance, we will put in a panel dress, for instance, we would put, like, that comes down here, we would maybe put braiding and things to create a silhouette which creates a shape. Because at a distance you use contrasting colours so that they bounce off of one another. The other day I was listening to Raymond when he was on, and he was speaking about makeup. Well, costumes are exactly the same. The makeup, if you put a certain colour over a certain colour costume, it won't light in the same way. So you have to understand how things react to different types of lighting. Bad lighting can create a costume to look really bad, and good lighting can make it look fabulous. So it's every part of the team that works on a show has to understand how colours react to one another. And we have to be aware in things like panto, where finales always have to have a specific, they tend to have a colour theme at the end. It's just a traditional British thing. Other styles of costume, when you're doing film and television costume, as I said, it has to be probably more authentic. It has to have look better close up. Mm-hmm. And you would never use the clashing colours or the really strong contrasting colours that you would use on stage in a professional version that is being filmed on television or in film. Also, if you're dressing professional opera, for instance, professional opera tends to be dressed in another style where you're looking for the authenticity, but you still have that kind of costume look, which is different from dressing something like, if you were dressing La Boheme, it's totally different from dressing Hello Dolly. Or say, let's just put two Christmas versions of like La Boheme, is it La Boheme? I think La Boheme set in Christmas, around about Christmas time, and so is, say, Scrooge, but you can't use the same costumes for them because they have intrinsically they're both Victorian, and intrinsically they both need the same kind of things, but Scrooge has to have a brighter look because it's a musical, and tends to, people's expectation of a musical costume is different to an opera costume. So it's it's more complicated than you think.
Yeah, no, but I think that's why you just mentioned Raymond's interview there as well, and I think that's what's interesting for people finding out, that there are all these intricacies that you almost take for granted. And I suppose when you do your job well, people do take them for granted. It's quite unfair in a way. But just, I suppose I'm now thinking of the context of, we spoke about schools earlier on. Some people do design work for their hire or something like that. So you're kind of talking through that process of, you would do it differently for a musical. So something might be in the same period of time, but you would design something different for a musical than you would for another genre, like a play or a TV show or something. And I suppose within that, you're talking about colors and things, but are there then other cheats? Like I'm thinking about something like Titanic, when you see all those buttons and laces and things like that. In some shows, that's maybe not practical, I suppose. So there are things that look the thing, but aren't designed to be worn like that. Would that be right?
No, that's correct. I mean, if you're doing something like a professional opera, they will probably tend to have maybe one or two costumes. If you're doing a musical, they'll tend to have 3 or 4. We would use zips, and we will use all sorts of things. We tend not to use Velcro because that's dangerous, it can split. But you would use a zip in a musical costume, but you wouldn't use it in a professional opera costume, because in a professional opera costume, they would tend to be sent all the undergarments that they would have worn in the time. They would have, their corsets, their underskirts, their bloomers, then their top dresses, and they would all button up. And if you're putting stuff out to pro stuff, they tend to have dressers who are at the side of the stage, get them in and out of their costumes. So they have time to practice. So
so a huge amount of thought going into that as to not just the look, but the practical, because at the end of the day, it is a costume. It's not your clothes. So I suppose it's how that works aesthetically in the piece, how it relates to the specifics of the piece, and then practically how it works night after night as a costume. So that must all be down to research that you do every time then thinking about a show.
Yeah, well, as a theatrical costumier, you have to actually read the script. You have to understand where the costume changes would be, and in certain productions, in older productions, there's time to change costume. Sometimes in modern productions, there can be times where a character goes off stage and basically has to come back on. We have to do things like in the Full Monty, or actually Sister Act, for instance, where the main character, Sweaty Eddie, comes on in a policeman's outfit. It dissolves into a disco outfit, then it dissolves back into a policeman's outfit in one number. So he's got 3 costumes on the top of one another that all have to be ripped off. They have to be easy to work, because if it doesn't work first time in the hobby market, then they'll rip it. So over the years, we've learned how things work. We practice within the warehouse. I'm often lucky enough to be in the productions if they're brand new or have something to do with them, so I can see where the changes have to happen, how you're going to do these things. So it makes a bit, the research for any kind of costuming of any production is the first part. I mean, at the moment, they've just released Disney's Little Mermaid. Mm-hmm. So we are now in the process of researching how we're going to create the tails, how we're going to create the structured costumes for people like Sebastian and Scuttle and things like that. That are going to be practical, but they have to also be practical to be moved around the country. We also have to be practical to come back to the warehouse. We have to turn them around, and not in a short space of time, but they have to be relatively practical, that we can wash them and dry them and clean them, or steam them or dry clean them in maybe 3 or 4 days, so that they can be turned around again to go to another customer, because we have to make sure that what we send out is clean enough to wear. I mean, at the end of the day, because in a professional show, these costumes are being laundered on a nightly basis by the costume team within the theatre. I mean, they'll maybe be steaming and ironing them through the day. They'll be washing their shirts and their underwear every day. Whereas in a hobby market, they will tend not to do that. That doesn't happen. So we have to make sure that the product goes out ready to wear and working the way that the customer wants it to work.
So, and it can, as you say, again, designing for costume rather than just your clothes, that idea of it being quite hardy, for want of a better word, that it can be out and in, transported, cleaned, brought back. And I suppose that all goes into your design process as well, about the longevity, for want of a better word, of your design.
Yes, of course. I mean, when you put out a new show, I mean, we were kind of just stopped in our tracks there. Shrek was the big show for the amateur world, just as COVID kicked off. These are very structural costumes that have to be, and the show was very, very popular. I mean, the license holders had licensed the production many times, probably more times than there were wardrobes in the country. So I ended up having to make a second wardrobe to service all the licenses for customers who were coming to me. And it wasn't through any kind of greed or anything. It was just there were long-standing customers and everybody had the license. So
when you say, just to confirm for people who don't know about this, when you say you had to make a second wardrobe of Shrek, that's kind of I'm looking at 2 kind of lorry loads that can go to different shows in the same week. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So
how many costumes are in Shrek then, roughly, a production?
Shrek's roughly 150 to 180.
But very, very specialised, I'm thinking.
Yeah, well, the bodysuit for Shrek was made by a theatrical costumier that I know in Glasgow. And I mean, the bodysuit on its own took something like 90 hours to make. It's all hand carved. All the all the foam inside it is punctured so it breathes. It's a huge undertaking. I mean, it cost in excess of £3,500 for the bodysuit on its own. That was without the costume.
Just for Shrek's costume.
That's the bodysuit. That doesn't include the costume. The prosthetics for Shrek were made in America by the guy that made the prosthetics for Broadway. I think last year my bill was about 1,200 to 1,400, and that was like 5 heads, 10 pairs of hands, ears, that kind of thing. It's a big undertaking, and it's a big. I mean, the actual wardrobe, like shows like Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, that was about 40,000 to make. Shrek, the 2 wardrobes were about 50,000. I mean, it's a lot of money. We're just in the process of having the kinky boots made for kinky boots. Each of I have to have 36 pairs of boots to cover the sizes for a normal company, because in a professional show, they will either hire somebody who fits into the boots, or they will, or the boots will be made for a leading character, for instance. But if you're in the ensemble, you will be auditioned, and if they've got size 12 boots, they'll hire a man with size 12 feet. That doesn't work in the hobby market, because in kinky boots, for instance, which is the big show for kind of this year and next year, you need 6 drag queens who might in the hobby market not be men. They might be girls dragged up to look like men in drag, so they don't have size 12 feet. So I need to have 36 pairs of boots to cover the sizes that would be in a normal company show, and each of these pairs of boots was just over £1,000 a pair.
Wow, it's a huge.
And that's before we've done the costumes. So the costumes on top of that will come in probably about another 8,000 to 10,000. So it's a big investment, but my customers are very loyal. I've been now trading for 22 years, just in the 23rd year, and there's customers that I have now provided costumes for every show they've ever done for 23 years. So these customers have helped me build my company up, and I believe that if new shows come out, everybody visualizes what they've seen. Like Kinky Boots, for instance, is a way to be televised this weekend, free of charge. So the world is going to see Kinky Boots, and everybody knows what Kinky Boots looks like. So I can't have my version of it. I have to, we have to sympathetically emulate the costumes. We're not allowed to copy them because a lot of them have IP. I am lucky that Thomas, who's making the boots for me in London, actually made the boots for the West End. He didn't make them all, he made most of them, and he did a lot of the pairs on them. So he had a good idea of what they were meant to look like. And he's also working on the footwear for Disney's Frozen at the moment. So
but yours will be what would you call special originals? Would that be?
They're very close. They're very close in design. Let's put them that way. You wouldn't. I think the best way to describe it is if you go into Asda, you can see a little girl's dress and it's blue and it's got sparkly bits on it, and it's called Frozen Princess. It can't be, or Ice Princess. There's no, it can't be called Frozen because that has a copyright.
There's
an audience sympathetically emulated.
There's an audience expectation there and a performer's expectation in some markets that you're trying to fulfill.
Yes, of course. I mean, you have to, in the main term is you have to fulfill the performer's expectation. I mean, and directors' expectations in these things. I mean, we all use the things that we can get hold of, access information. YouTube is the biggest source of any information. And we all do it as directors and choreographers. First place we go is what's on YouTube. If there's a new show comes out, we sit and watch every version of it. Well, I watch every version of it to see when there's amateur, like they tend to be released in America first. So you get various community versions on that are, some of them are less than talented people that are in them. Some of them can be quite atrocious. But it gives you an idea what the costumiers in America have done with the costumes, adapting them from what they know that the professional costumes look like.
But again, going down that route of what's practical, what's durable, what solutions they've come up with.
Yeah, you have to. There's parts of it that you have to kind of omit because they're just not practical. Using like a fairly recent show, Priscilla Queen of the Desert, for instance, the finale of Priscilla has emus, it has koala bears, it has all sorts of interesting things going about. But it was designed for a company of maybe 16 or 18, not a company of 46. So we had to add in characters for company members who might not be the natural emu in the situation. So we had to put in sympathetic costumes that kind of didn't make people feel self-conscious. The other thing is, at the very end, the three main characters are meant to bring down cages, which then form the roof of the Sydney Opera House. But we sent the cages out in the first production, and they just didn't work. The boys didn't have time to get a hold of them. They hadn't practiced with them. And then it just became something that we actually omitted from the wardrobe after the first two versions going out, and just said, because I had directed the show and I was also performing in it, I kind of said to the directors or the people who I was dealing with, is, look, just admit that, but it's a bit of trickery, but it's not practical when there's 48 people on stage. So I mean, when there's only 16 people on stage and a bus, and you're working at I think, I can't remember the theatre it was in the West End, but a great big stage to house a bus and 16 people and a Sydney Opera House. The Palace Theatre, that's right. Yeah, it was easy, but say for instance on the Tivoli stage in Aberdeen, it's the size of a postage stamp, really. And with a bus and a cast of people, it was impractical.
Again, I suppose that process that you go through is thinking how you adapt something and how you design something for the context you're working in. So aside from all of that, so we've spoken about what you do, and we've spoken about some of the challenges within that, and some of the processes that you have to go through. I want to take it back a totally different way now. And actually talk to you about how this started. You weren't born a theatrical costumier, or maybe you were, who knows? But how did you've said that you've had your business for as long as this now, but I personally know that wasn't your immediate background. You did other things before. So talk to me about that career journey, really, how you've come to be what you're doing now.
Just kind of like a lot of your other interviewees, I fell into this. Not by accident. It was a thought process that I had. Going back to when I was a wee boy, I really liked history. I knew just even as a 7-year-old that people wore different things in different times in history. That historical thing kind of went through. I enjoyed drama. The first kind of costumes I ever had anything to do with, I joined the junior drama in Forfar when I was in primary 7 and then in second year, I was cast as Widow Twankey in their pantomime. So that was the very first time that I thought, right, well, I've got to put your own costumes together. I mean, the lady, that like any junior drama, there was always a lady in a set of curtains lurking somewhere with it.
I remember in the Brecon part, it was the couple of weeks, 2 weeks before the panto, the mums in those days were called in, and they were given a square of fabric, 2 sheets of tinsel, and what it should look like. You know what I mean? The mums were sent on their way to make out beautiful tabards for everyone in Cumfolda's
tabard with tinsel on it. Yeah,
that's exactly it. Absolutely.
Well, I suppose even as a second year kid, I think it must have been 13. I was precocious, so I had a fairly definite idea what I needed to look like. So I instructed my mother to make a specific skirt out of a specific pair of curtains. My brother, I don't know if you still get them. You used to get, it was called hot rod or something. It was like these plastic tracks with your cars, and you used to put it into a form and it created loops. Well, I managed to fashion a crinoline hoop out of that, much to the disgust. I always had that Blue Peter gene. So I created a wig using paper and wool, and I made it out, I think, a green coat hanger and wire and stuff like that. So even at that point, I kind of knew that I could create things. So as things went on, I did amateur theatre, I directed, so kind of moving further on, even just doing the costume thing The first hire I ever did was I was involved in a company and they were doing Broadway Pirates of Penzance. And I'd met a lady in Kerry Panto who was absolutely fabulous. Nothing was ever a problem. She was a bit of a control freak, bless her cotton socks, but I learned that she liked to make everything. So everything was sewn on this. I mean, everything was on the stage was sewn. And then I learned if I drew pretty pictures, she could sew it. So that was a good sign. So I bought the fabric, we put the thing together. I sat around, I mean, the friendships that I formed in that theatre company, I still have, and they had a lot to do. I sat around a dining room table with 2 or 3 of them. We glue gunned hats and things for this production till 3 in the morning. And
was this the first sort of full production that you were designing yourself, you mean?
Yeah, well, that was the first time I designed something, because I had a specific idea the way the thing had to look. Prior to that, I'd done a production of Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat, but it had to be based on the New London version that had just opened with Jason Donovan in it. So we were kind of copying what they had done. So the first time I'd ever designed anything was that. And the first time I hired out to a school, and it didn't come into my head that, yes, I had 20 dresses, but I didn't know if it didn't come in my head that they had to fit the people that were going on. So they were all beautifully packaged and delivered to the company. And I think it was a school, and I'm sure teachers are very practical people. So they just used blue tack and sticky tape and safety pins, and they made them fit the kids that were going on.
You did fit, okay.
And then I moved on. I never trained in anything theatrical. I mean, I always tell everybody that I trained at Duncan of Jordanson, which is a very prestigious art school in Dundee, but I did catering. At that time, there was a catering school there. So I came out with an HND in hotel management.
I
then went into training. And when I was nearing 30, I'd made a decision that I was going to do something theatrical or have my own business. So I was lucky within that friend group at the time. Paul, who was a friend of mine, his girlfriend was the stage manager at the Rep. So I worked part-time at the Rep for a year, but backstage, because I thought I might want to go into stage management. But I learned at that time it was like a factory, and it was Groundhog Day every day. I mean, I went down the Yellow Brick Road 60 times at Christmas, because that was the Christmas show. Sometimes you had to be in the same place at the same time, and it wasn't what my theatre was. My theatre was show week and going for a drink in the bar, and then it teamed up with. It just so happened one Sunday morning, the Noda magazine had arrived on, because it was all things saintly and Bible-like for theatre. Had arrived, and in that there was 3 adverts for costume companies, and one of them was Utopia. So the
adverts promoting them, you mean, or selling them?
No, they were up for sale.
Oh, wow! Like a whole company was for sale.
The whole costume was up. The whole company was up for sale. A part of the time, Gordon and I, we'd spoken about it, because we'd done this thing with making the Pirates of Penzance, and it was something that I was very keen on. So we went to see 2 companies. We went to see a company called Barrett's of Bath, and we also went to see Utopia. I was very excited about Barrett's of Bath, because then I could see live things like pannier hoops and crinoline hoops and bustle suits, and Gordon was far more practical, because he turned around and he says they're made out of curtains. I mean, you could always imagine you could always rely on Gordon to kind of pull the thing back down to earth. The reason when we went to see Utopia, we didn't buy Utopia because it had the best costumes. It just had the best owner. Pam, who owned it, was this amazing woman. She was kind of like a cross between Madame Arcati and Adina from AbFab. She had like bouffant hair. She had red talons. When we went to meet her, she was sitting in a red military jacket. It was all braided up, and a pair of jodhpurs and knee-high boots. And she handed us, she said, "I've made your lunch, darlings." And she handed me 2, like a Marks and Spencer's carrier bag with sandwiches in it. She says, "I don't do cooking, darling, not with these nails." So
you liked her?
We liked her. I think the best way to like it, we bought Utopia because it was like buying a house. It felt right.
Okay.
she was asking a certain amount of money. We left, we came back up here. I came back up to Scotland and tried to fund it. It was very, very difficult to find the funding. The bank just didn't see the relevance in it. It's
quite a unique business. It's not like you're opening another roll shop or a hairdresser.
No, it just didn't click the buttons at that point. And it kind of rolled on for about, it must have been 9-10 months. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, there was a phone call from Pam. She said, "Are you still interested?" And I said, "I would love to buy it." I said, "But I just can't get the funding." She says, "Well, how much can you get?"
Oh, wow.
So I told her the figure. She says, "That's what I'll take then." So that's how it happened.
It was meant
to be, yeah. Also, there was also that thing that, and I tell it to a lot of people, and a lot of kids will think I'm just absolutely mad. I had heard about the cosmic shop, so you write down what you want and you put it in your wallet.
About this, yeah.
And every time you open your wallet, you think about it, and that the positive thought made every day. I would think, right, who can I speak to? And then all of a sudden, I was just so lucky. I went back to the bank. The bank manager had changed. It was a lady now that I had known. I didn't know her personally, but a friend of mine knew her. And she was now the manager, and she was all over this idea because she was new in the bank and she wanted just something different. And the funding was there within weeks. So in August 1998, 2 Luton vans went down to Brighton. They collected roughly, I think it would have been about 1,500, maybe 1,800 costumes from Pam, and brought them up to Dundee, where we'd got a warehouse just opposite the Whitehall in Belfield Street. We opened it with room to spare, I think. And I remember my mother standing outside. I mean, there was 2 doorways into the warehouse, and my mother was standing with her cigarette, as she did, at the front door, and she's a very practical, Kerry woman, and she says, "Well, you hate to make a lot of money out of this shit," she says. So
I was going to ask there, but when you said we bought this idea, we bought the company, what was it you bought? You said you bought 1,500 costumes, is that right?
We bought 1,500 costumes and a customer book. So the customer book was probably the most expensive thing.
So a customer book, I'm sure but there might have been people that wouldn't trust new owners or weren't automatically going to go with you, or?
Well, 22 years ago, people relied on stuff around the doors more, and the advent of the internet and eBay and Amazon, where you buy from pictures, has made costuming a far greater thing. I mean, I started costuming and built my customer base in Scotland, really. I mean, that was where I costumed the majority of the amateur theatre companies in Scotland. But now it's totally UK wide. I mean, we now are one of the biggest costume houses in the UK.
I was about to say you bought 1,500, and I don't know if like some of them, well, some odd ones are maybe still in the system, but how many costumes do you have now?
I haven't counted them, but I think just on a rough guess, about 30,000.
30,000, that's a lot of ironing.
It's a lot of ironing, yeah. You have to have your poultry steam iron ready for it.
So you've turned it from 1,500 into 30,000, and
yeah,
that's again plays, musicals, pantomimes, up close, Saturday. And you said you're going, is it a UK wide market?
UK and Ireland. We service a lot of companies in Ireland and Southern Ireland now as well. They're very competitive there. They have
in Ireland, did you say?
In Ireland, yeah. They have aims and they have kind of adjudications and things like that.
Wow.
So people go in and they get their costumes kitted. So whenever they find somebody who provides the costumes the way they think they should be provided, they actually don't tell people where they came from. They kind of hang on to it.
I was going to ask another kind of practical business question as well, because there's the obviously we're talking about the role of a costumier and what's involved in that. You're obviously a business owner. That's a huge part of what you do day to day. And when you said it costs something like £3,000 just to get Shrek's bodysuit made, but if I'm not going to obviously hire Shrek for his costumes for £3,000. So how much would I be paying for Shrek's outfit? Or is it a package? Do I have to buy everything? Or how does it work? How much does it cost?
Depending on the show. I mean, the new shows as they're coming out, to hire every costume that's needed at the price they should be hired, it would make them too expensive. So we normally have to hire the show between 10 and 12 times before it's actually paid for itself.
Okay. So that's it going, just to clarify, that's it being designed, being made, all your outlay in terms of hours of people sewing up and designers, and then it has to go out and in and be on stage at least 10, 12 runs to make a profit.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, normally that is taken over 2 years, and that's normally the process you would go through. The big shows as they're released, they normally have a big year and then the following year and then a third year before the tail off. So if you think of something like Priscilla, which was a big show in 2016, it was a really big show in 2017, we did some in 2018, now it's in a container and it's 30 crates.
And how do you go about predicting what to make? I mean, at some point you must have known Shrek is the next big. Are you kind of watching what's on the West End of Broadway when it comes off? There's a period of time, and you know it's going to be available for the, as you say, the hobby market. Or what do you make and what do you not make?
Well, I tend to be a bit of a. I tend to make the new stuff as it comes out, because a lot of my customers are in that first wave. I mean, for people that don't know, the rights holders tend to invite people to do shows when they're first released. So a lot of my customers are normally in that wave. So I really have to have the costumes available for them. It also helps because I know the companies and I know who's likely to get parts and stuff like that. So in the first sort of 3 or 4 shows, we're still making up stuff for the production, because your principles are going to change until you have all the sizes. I mean, sizes of costumes kind of fit into the same as clothes sizes. So I mean, there's generic sizes that we will make, and principles. You know that you're not going to get a principal in a certain size if that person didn't look like that on Broadway, that kind of thing, or on the West End. So you know that they're going to be within a range or things like that. Or you might get shows like Evita, which had a big resurgence a wee while ago. It had a new look because it had been redesigned, because we, like, the original version of Evita was done in a certain way. Like things like the posh people at the club were all done in black and white in the original version, and in the new version they were done. I think they were done in evening wear. So as shows are revised and reimagined in various states and then re-released, we have to make, like, for instance, I've got 3 versions of Anything Goes, because in my time as a costumier, the show has been released 3 times and
revived. And I suppose the people want the last big one in London or something. They want it to look like that one. Or then some productions jump way back, though, don't they? And then they revive the 1970s version or something.
Well, for instance, Hello Dolly was on Broadway a bit midler. It's coming over to London with Imelda Staunton playing Dolly. That wardrobe, the way that the wardrobe is done, was the way it was done when it was originally done in the 60s.
The first time round. So it jumps all the way back now.
Yeah. So for things like, so there have been revivals. There have been revivals of the revivals, and now this revival has gone back
to the
original set, the original costume designs, and the original choreography. So we have to. And Hello Dolly, when it was on Broadway, had a wee bit of a resurgence in the hobby market, because folks say, "Oh, Hello Dolly's on Broadway," and then if the cross from Broadway to the West End, you tend to get like a resurgence of some old shows. And if the revival shows, like Anything Goes, is a way to be revived yet again. Yeah. So it's going back into London in the spring. We have to be on top of all these things. I mean,
you're kind of watching the market. It's a market, I suppose, for you, isn't it? That's where you're the businessman.
You have to understand where things are going. Things normally do a couple of tours, and then they'll maybe do a third tour, and they'll do a tour based on the original London West End version. Then maybe another production company will take over and kind of redesign it a wee bit and put it out on tour again. And then it normally takes maybe 10 years before it hits the hobby market. But but when it hits it's also a marketing thing for the license holders, because they're then releasing it to a new market who are eager to
put your video. That's it.
they're eager to get to it. They're eager to book it. I mean, like this is like Little Mermaid, for instance, was released a week ago, and that I've had 6 inquiries and two positive bookings already. So, and that's for 2022. It's not like for
that's kind of lining up what you need to make and things as well. So just a couple of final questions. I could obviously speak to you all night and catch up, but lots of interesting things there. So aside from following the markets, if you could choose a period, what's your favorite thing to design for in terms of if we said musicals, but what's your favorite sort of period? Do you have one of those?
Yeah, I have 2. I really love Georgian, like Marie Antoinette style things.
Right. Okay.
I think at that period in time, especially for men's costumes, they were the most flamboyant they could ever have been. I mean, they were flouncy, they were frilly. But I really, for women, for creating a really lovely silhouette, the Edwardian era at the turn of 1905, that was when like that hourglass silhouette was that's the perfect silhouette that a woman wants to create. And these costumes are what create that silhouette. So those are my 2 favorite periods. I like making up a bustle suit, I have to say.
Shape of all that and things as well. What about I think you've kind of lifted the lid on a few things tonight that some people won't have thought of before. What do you think are the biggest challenges in the role of being a theatrical costumier, or indeed a business owner that owns a theatrical costumier, that people maybe don't think about, something that they never consider?
Well, there's things that you didn't realize. I mean, I didn't realize that you had to understand the physiology, how people expand and contract. Like if somebody gets bigger or smaller, I mean, where things girth in arms and chunky bits here and there. I mean, we're all like pies and wine, so you have to accommodate these things. I also didn't realize that you had to be a psychologist, because
what do you mean
sometimes,
by that?
well, somebody gets a costume and they don't like it, and that's their preference. The costume's not for them. Hello, Dolly Levi wears it, not Sandra White that works in the Bakers.
So it's a character's costume.
So the costume's for the character. So it's not about, I mean, I had a situation with a Beauty and the Beast where the girl refused to wear the dark wigs, but I said, well, you're going to disappoint all the little girls who are turning up in their yellow dresses because Belle to them has dark hair. Yeah. And she says, dark hair washes me out. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I didn't draw the cartoon. You chose the part knowing she was going to be dark haired. So put the wig on and change your makeup. And somebody like Raymond would have told you.
How do you approach that as well?
And the last thing is you've got to be a psychic, because you get Friday morning calls. There's no costumes for John Smith, and you look through their order and it says, well, there's no John Smith on your order. Yes, but he's in the show.
So how do you deal with that though, as a
just being pleasant? You just be pleasant. It's not a problem. Just tell me, is John Smith like Andrew Green, or is he like Bill White? You know, so the women, the wardrobe lady or wardrobe man will tell me what they roughly look like. I will stalk them on Facebook and have a wee look at them, and then I can basically tell the shape and size of somebody just by looking at them, because I've been doing it for
so aside from being a designer, a businessman, an entrepreneur, you also have to sort of deal in personal diplomacy, for want of a better word, sometimes.
Well, yeah, because everybody's doing this for fun. I mean, you can't get angry with people because everybody makes mistakes. I make mistakes, but in my world, I have to take it on the chin whether I've made the mistake or not. I mean, I at the end of the day, you can't. If they don't like the costume, you have to send them another costume. Don't argue with them. Just send them another one. I mean, that's a simple thing. And I'm not saying that costume is going to be any better than the one they had. And I'm not going to say that they're going to like it, but they'll get another one.
Okay. And finally, I always love the story of what did you call it? The cosmic shop, when you write the write a little message in your wallet, and it makes you think about that as well. So it's somebody that's thinking about, or maybe just like you were, has an interest in a costume and perhaps wants to consider it as a career, maybe not building up a huge business like yourself, but that idea of theatrical costumier and things, if they do have an interest in it, what would you be saying to them as a career path or steps towards a career path in the industry?
In the industry, you have to be committed to what you're doing. You have to have an understanding of the people you're dealing with. It's like any other career path. The bigger the understanding that you have of the business, the product, and the customer, it's paramount to anything like that. The cosmic shop thing, I think, if you dream big, you'll get big. It's just the way it is. I mean, working hard, having a good work ethic is a good thing. I can work 60, 80 hours a week at times. It does get easier because in the first instances, I was doing it on my own, and due to COVID, I'll be doing it back on my own when we get started again. But at the end of the day, if you put your best in, you can only try your best in everything. But if you put your best in, you'll get the best out. At the end of the day, it's the same as a costume. A costume can come out of the box. I only provide from the neck to the ankles. If you don't put the wig on, if you don't put the gloves on, if you don't make the effort, to look like the character, you'll just look like Sandra White for the Bakers. So
Sandra's getting a few mentions tonight. Sandra's getting quite a few mentions.
She's been the leading lady in Ballahoola Operatic for 45 years.
Every example I've given. Well, listen, all I want to say is thank you so much for your time tonight. And I think it's been a really interesting insight for a lot of people into how it works and what you do. And how it all comes together as well. So I'll speak to you very, very soon. But thank you very much, Ewan Campbell and Utopia Costumes.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.